1997, you come in as the DA who's promising to reduce crime in Atlanta. There was a lot of violence here, a lot of death, and you did that. But for people who don't remember 23 years ago what this city was like, take us through it.
Well, we had every weekend we had deaths of young people. We had, I believe, in 1996, about 186 people who were killed. Before that, we had, in some years, we had as many as 280 people killed in the city of Atlanta. And now, from 1997 to 2016, the number dropped to 79. That has been our lowest so far. So it was a terrible time because people were concerned that they might be swept up in the violence and either them or their families killed because of what was going on. And so people made it very clear to me that, we can't have a prosperous, safe community without this violence. And the other thing that happened is the population of Atlanta had really just stalled. People were not moving to our city. And as I say to people all the time, nobody wants to live in a place that is unsafe. And so you'll see that after 1997, what you'll see is our population starts to tick up.
For your critics, though, who say, yes, but how did you do it?
Right.
How did you bring crime down? By putting black men away?
No.
How'd you do it?
Well, this is the thing that we recognized. A couple of things is holding people accountable does not also mean that you have to put them in jail. And that means that if you are involved in the commission of a crime, then there are also alternative sentences that don't have to mean jail. And through the years, we've had developed drug courts, mental health courts, and a number of other things. Also, in my office, one of the things that we really focused upon was crime prevention with young people. We put together a number of programs, Legal Lives, Junior DAs, reading programs. But what I felt all along is you could not reduce crime unless there was a connection between the DA's office and the community. So we also developed something called community prosecutors. We actually placed our prosecutors out in the community.
A cousin of community policing.
That's correct. And so we dealt directly with community members, community groups, and what we tried to do was to work with them to prevent crime. So let me tell you that the effect that had is that previous to that time, if you looked at the cases that were presented in Fulton County, the conviction rate was only about 52%. And the reason is it was hard for them to get people to come down as witnesses. But what you find is once you work closer with the community, then there's a trust that develops, and then it makes it much easier to ask someone to come down and cooperate. So because of that, because of all of those things that work together, also because we also realized that when you talk about violence in a community, generally you're talking about 20% of the population that is causing about 80% of the crime. So what we tried to do is to focus on that 20%, and using all of those methods together, we were able to lower the crime rate here in Fulton County.
Project Level Up, that was part of that too.
Level Up, we believe, is going to be a project we hope is emulated all across the country. We have figured out by looking at the data that if you are a juvenile and you've been arrested 3 times, the chances that you'll be arrested the 4th time is about 88%. So what we did is to take on the public defender as one of our main partners, so that when someone had 3 arrests, we're working to make sure that they aren't arrested the 4th time. So we're using aftercare, mentoring, and family intervention to make sure that that child doesn't accumulate that 4th arrest.
When you talk about what you've seen in your 23 years as district attorney, and if you succeed again, you'll be on the job for a quarter of a century. What are the 3 accomplishments that you're most proud of, and any regrets?
I think the thing that I'm most proud of is probably our association with the community, because we were, it was really unheard of for our DAs to kind of stake themselves in the community. And I'm often reminded of one of our community programs where we seized crack cocaine houses in communities. And we seized the house over on Atwood Avenue in the West End. There'd been a lot of complaints about drugs. I actually went over to the house, and when I went over to the house, the elderly couple that lived next door, and when I went to visit them, the elderly father actually had his grill on the inside of the house. And I was asking his wife, why has he got a grill on the inside? And she said, because of the drugs next door, he was not able to even stand on the porch and grill. So we seized the house, we got it rehabbed, we put a police officer in that house for a year, and so afterwards we had a celebration, and I was able to go back with the community. You know, we had hot dogs and bands, but on the day that I was over, I saw somebody standing on the porch, and it was him, and he said to me, Mr. Howard, I'm grilling. So I'm very, very proud of that. The other thing that I'm proud of is what we did in the area of police misconduct. If you look around the country, what you'll see is that in most of the communities, the number of citizens that have been killed continues to be high. Now, I was looking just this week at Maricopa County in Phoenix. They've already had 28 people to get killed. We don't have those numbers in Atlanta. And I believe one of the reasons that we don't is because our office has been really aggressive in investigating these cases and presenting them when we had the appropriate evidence. The other thing that people also don't sometimes realize, that because of that violence, also we had policemen that were killed on the average of 1 per year. But we have not had an Atlanta police officer to get killed in a situation with a confrontation since 2005. It's been 15 years since we've had an Atlanta policeman to get killed. And then I guess I would say probably the third thing that I'm proud of is our efforts to provide second chances for defendants. We've got a conviction integrity unit. We look at convictions that took place in our office to see whether or not they were just. We've got a 5-person citizen committee. They review these cases. We had 131 people that applied for a petition to ask us to look at their cases. And if I see a case that it looks like it was not justified, then we're going to do whatever we can to exonerate it.
Even on your watch, I wonder, because I read about the man who was on a life sentence after 20 years, he walks out of there. What does that feel like? You're a DA. You put people away, 92% conviction rate.
Well, let me tell you, that man's name was Darrell Hill, and he was convicted before I took office in 1991. And but the charge that he was sentenced to life was only less than 2 grams of cocaine. And I just thought it was ridiculous that he was serving a life sentence. But at any rate, we asked one of our Superior Court judges to exonerate him, and the judge signed the order. We were able to then bring Mr. Hill to the program at Tyler Perry's, and and not only were we able to exonerate him, but on that night, he found out that Tyler Perry had given him a job. And I'm gonna tell you, that wasn't a feeling that it's hard to explain how great that made me feel, that we were able to do that for him, but also having this unit, it allowed us to have the potential to help other people as well.
I want to talk about Fani Willis. She's someone you mentored over the year. You supported her. How, after being in office for as long as you have, for several decades, does the woman that you mentored beat you, come out ahead of you in the primary?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the allegations that have been made against me. You know, it seemed like that's all that they talked about was just those allegations. And those allegations were personally very devastating to me because I've been in office for 23 years. And it's just strange that in this election cycle, that those allegations arise.
So you focus on the timing there.
Yeah.
But they are very serious allegations. You know, you're the CEO, nonprofit, the ethics investigations that are going on, that money was funneled towards you. Did you do anything wrong?
Absolutely not. I think, and that's why I'm so confident that after any investigation, wherever they conduct the investigation, it will clearly exonerate me. The ethics violations have to do with something that almost every American citizen does, and that is ask for a raise. I asked for a raise, and I asked for it at City Hall. Went to the president of City Council, who was Caesar Mitchell, the head of the Public Safety Committee, C.T. Martin, and the mayor. And they approved the raise for me. They sent it over to my office. I actually wrote them back a letter, even indicating how it would be administered, and even in the letter told them that it would be administered by the nonprofit. So I think that once people they look at it, they'll see that that's all it was. The other complaints that they're talking about are administrative forms that I've filed for 23 years. In fact, the small nonprofit that we had was formed in 2009. And so I've been filing those forms with that
You're saying why now?
Yeah, since 2009, I've been filing those forms. So, and they, some have tried to give the impression that we did it to somehow hide monies, but I think that whatever investigation takes place, you'll see that it did not happen. It's really unfortunate about the other allegations because they filed a federal lawsuit 2 or 3 weeks before the election. And that doesn't give me a chance to respond. There's nothing I can do about that. But I always ask people to look at the balance of my career in the DA's office. That's not the kind of person that I have been during all the years that I've been in practice, and I hope that people will see that.
You accuse your opponents of playing politics here. That's what you're doing. At the same time, they say you're the one playing politics. Rayshard Brooks, you charge too quickly, hypocrite, grandstanding, again, political.
Right.
Address all of it. Did you do this to stay in office?
Well, let me tell you the things that I have talked about with my opponent involve two things. Number one, it involves the intervention of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has announced, and in fact, they have actually gone out and recruited people to vote in a Democratic primary. And the question that I ask people is, why are the Republicans so interested in the Democratic primary for a district attorney? A lot of people in our city believe that it is directly related to the airport because, as you know, the Republicans have been trying to take over the airport. And one of the things that they offer as the reason for taking over the airport is because of corruption at the airport and City Hall. And it certainly makes it real convenient when they've got a DA that they funded in office. The other thing that I believe should be of major concern is the relationship between my opponent and the Atlanta Police Union.
They've given her money.
They've given her money. As the Republican Party, it's hard to even figure out how much money they've given her. They've endorsed her, and with the police union, they only endorse you for one reason, and that is the promise not to prosecute police officers.
And to be clear, you believe that Fani Willis has given them her word that she will not be tough on police.
Absolutely, and in fact, over the last couple of days, she has been actually touting their position with respect to Rayshard Brooks. She has literally been their spokesperson criticizing me for taking the actions against Rayshard Brooks. It's really funny, Sharon, that with respect to speed, before 2015, the Atlanta Police Department investigated their own criminal homicides involving police officers. And generally, they would clear those officers within 2 or 3 days.
Everything was justified.
And they never said a word about speed. Even today, and I think you're well aware of this, many of the officers who are involved with homicides are administratively cleared to return to full duty within a matter of days. Nobody says anything about speed, but they only criticize the DA when the DA moves expeditiously to charge someone. And as I've said before, we've done this now. This is the 4th time we've done it in a case before an indictment.
But have you done it this fast?
Yes.
Or is this part of this social justice awakening in America and Atlanta being a focus, particularly with this case after George Floyd?
Well, I would ask people to look at the case of James Burns, who was an Atlanta police officer who shot and killed a 22-year-old, shot him in the back of the head. And we were lucky enough to have videotape. Chief George Turner fired the police officer, and within 6 days after he fired him, we asked that that officer be arrested. And so it was the same circumstance as Rayshard Brooks. The reason that we were able to do it is because of the videotape. And this is also something that is so ironic. As you know, the GBI went to Glenn County with Mr. Arbery, and with one videotape, they arrested somebody the next day. Nobody said anything about speed. So we had 8 videotapes. We had 3 eyewitnesses, 8 associated witnesses. It gave the unit in my office, and a lot of people don't realize, we've got a unit that is particularly focused upon these kinds of cases with lawyers, with investigators, and with administrators. And it gave us an opportunity to make a charging decision. We did that, and it had nothing to do with politics. What it did have something to do with is the evidence that was available to us in the case.
Why was it so important for you to be so vocal then? 20 minutes on national television, exhibits, one of the victims present. Why so vocal at that time? That wasn't politics?
No. What it was is that people wanted to know. This is one of the things that I have also figured out during this election process, is that in my office, we spent a lot of time working hard, but maybe we didn't spend enough time communicating that work to the citizens. And what I realized in the case with Rayshard Brooks is that people wanted to understand whatever it was that we were doing. One of the things that the question that I always ask is, suppose I had gotten up and said, the policeman should not be charged. I don't think you'd be getting any complaints about speed. The speed was because we recognized what had happened. But we thought that it made a lot of sense to carefully explain what we were doing so that people could see that it was not something that was just capricious, that it was based upon sound theory and the abundance of evidence that was available to us at the time.
I want to talk about your relationship with Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. She's not exactly endorsing you. She says there are other cases that you have not cleared. DeAndre Phillips, 2017, I think you promised that you were going to proceed one way or the other.
Right.
Where does that stand? The mayor says there are other cases, use of force cases,
Right.
that you have not moved on.
Right. Well, I just find it really kind of strange that the police department would say that, or the mayor. And the reason is, that the reason that we have not been able to move is because of our inability to rapidly recreate the crime scene.
Let's be clear, you're alleging obstruction, not in a legal sense perhaps, but obstruction from the police department. They're not cooperating.
What has happened is that first thing that I think that is really important is that policemen ought to have on a body cam. And the body cam should be in use during the entirety of the crime. That doesn't happen in the cases. In fact, 60% of those cases that the mayor is talking about are cases where there is no body cam. And in fact, two of the cases that are probably the most people talk about most often, Jamarian Robinson and Jimmy Atchison, both involving City of Atlanta officers, there is no body cam. There is no dash cam. And this is the other circumstance. So then our next level of witnesses involves being able to talk to the police. The police will not interview with the district attorney's office. So also then the next level is trying to obtain documentary evidence. So what we, not only do we have to file open records requests with the City of Atlanta, we have to file subpoenas to get the evidence.
So what you're saying is you can't just make a phone call department to department and get a police officer's record.
That's correct. We have to go through the steps of filing an open records request, waiting on the request to be fulfilled. And for instance, in the Jimmy Atchison case, we've already filed 3 open records requests with the City of Atlanta. We filed a subpoena to get evidence in that case. And we have not had the opportunity to speak with not one of those officers who was on the inside of the apartment where Jimmy Atchison was killed. So then what we have to do is we have to utilize experts from all around the country to try to see whether or not we can recreate the crime scenes. I'm hoping that after all of this has happened, I know that one of the councilmen has introduced a bill, Antonio Brown, a bill that would allow us to receive that information without having to use a subpoena or without having to use an open records request. In that bill, I think he also asked that the policemen not only wear the body cams, but that they keep them on, because it's very frustrating when you're explaining to a family and you have to tell them that the policeman says he turned the body cam off just before the incident happened. People don't believe that. They don't believe it's true. So I'm hoping as we move forward that the evidence will be more readily available, which will allow us to move faster.
Rayshard Brooks, can you get a conviction there?
I believe so. I believe that when people look at what happened, and I think that we can carefully show that his back was clearly turned away from that officer. He was no threat. I think that when people look at the conversation that took place with the officer prior to the shooting, they will see that the guy was not a threat. They had searched him already. When you see that conversation, it's kind of hard to even realize that at the end of it, that he'll end up getting shot. But also, I think when people look at what these officers did after the shooting, it really does illustrate the state of mind that they had. And it was not the state of mind that they felt that he was a danger to them. And so, yes, I think we can get a conviction. It's always tough to convict a police officer, but I believe if the evidence is presented correctly, we can get a conviction for Rayshard Brooks.
What about the fallout anecdotally on the streets of Atlanta? 8-year-old Sequoia Turner,
Right.
murdered.
Right.
It's so tough for people. And we're hearing the stories of members of the community saying the police are nowhere around. There seems to be a slow roll, a slow response. It's not being talked about. It's not proven. What are you hearing?
Well, I've actually gone and talked to people. I talked to some of the business owners on Auburn Avenue. As you know, that's where 13 shootings took place over the 4th of July. And the business owners told me that they had actually asked the police department to come and provide a certain number of officers. And they were disappointed that none of those officers showed up. And I've talked to other citizens, I've listened to the radio, I've listened to people complain. And I think what we have to do is look at another recent example of this circumstance that occurred after the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson, Missouri.
I was there.
And as you know, afterwards, a number of police departments stopped proactively policing. And the crime rate shot up so significantly that it was actually referred to as the Ferguson effect. I'm disturbed by accounts that I've received from citizens that the young men who were responsible for the shooting had in fact been at the same location for several weeks. Unimpeded. And if that happened, that's a sad situation. So I'm hoping that the police department will see that it is not the appropriate to, in a sense, punish the community because of our criminal justice laws that demand that when someone has committed a crime, that they should be handled appropriately. I hope that they will go back to patrolling. The people in the community aren't asking the policemen to leave. What they're asking the policemen to do is to patrol the neighborhood in a constitutional, unbiased, nonviolent way. That's what people are asking for. They're not asking them to leave. They just want them to do it in the right way.
Your job is fascinating in some respects to me, because here you are, a black man of a certain era, having to prosecute and really straddle and balance what's going on in the community, the reform, the cries for justice, and the demands. And now the demands have gotten much higher, and people think justifiably so. And I wonder how you square the job you are doing now as the district attorney in Fulton County with people who look like you, who look like me, and what they want now.
Well, I am happy to take on this responsibility. And I think we've reached a point in history where people are demanding significant change. I just don't think that people are going to go back to where we were before. And if we are to make significant change, I think that what people, I ask them to look at, you need to put someone in office who has already made significant changes before, because this is not a job, I believe, for a newcomer. Things are going to change in the criminal justice system. Our police department has to change. The relationship between the police and the community has to change. We have got to stop talking about correcting the problem. We've got to put together some concrete changes. If that doesn't happen, I think that you're going to continue to see the demonstrations all across the country. And that's what I am prepared and looking forward to doing.
So if your opponents, your critics would then say, if he wins again, that's a quarter of a century. Shouldn't there have been more change? Isn't he part of an entrenched system, part of the problem?
Well, I would say that in any measure, you would see that I have been the person attempting to be the solution. Right now, I have 9 permanent solutions that I think should be made. I presented those solutions as far back as 2010. And in fact, presented them to my own association of prosecutors. So we've been doing this for a long time. As I said, prosecuting the cases since 2002. And so I believe that I am squarely on the side not only of the innovation, but also on the side of change. And that's what I'm asking people to do. I would be saddened as a citizen if we had a DA who decided that they simply were not even going to prosecute those cases. I'm willing to do it. It takes a lot of courage to do it. And I have shown that I am willing to stand up and do it.
2 questions and then we're done. One difficult. What, if anything, can you tell us about Kathy Carter and an inappropriate relationship? Was there one? Did you do anything wrong? What can you tell us?
Well, as I said, in each one of these investigations, as you know, the investigations were handled by the county, and the county had already moved to dismiss them. They were filed some long period after the statute required, and that was with both of the allegations. So that's why I've said repeatedly, under any investigation, I think I would be completely exonerated.
Morally, are you exonerated though, Paul? Is
Think
there anything that you want to say?
morally and legally, yes.
Okay. And then finally, you said your opponent took the money. What does that mean? There's a lot of people who agree with you and say that means she's going to work with the police and not hold them accountable after Election Day. Should you get another term, are you going to keep up this pace when it comes to police corruption, violations, use of force violations?
I ask people to look at my record. Started in 2002, and we've kept up the pace. And because of the energy of this situation, I believe it gives us the opportunity to do more because there are more people involved. There's an additional focus. So I'm just really excited about the changes that we can make in the future.
DA Paul Howard, I thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
All right. Thank you for having us here today.